Hello and welcome to this webinar on funding solution for district energy development. My name is Emilia Pisani and I will be your moderator for this webinar. As such, I would like to give a warm welcome to all our speakers who have agreed to share some of their knowledge and experience with us today. During the next hour or hour and a half, we'll hear from Victor Gansel, Program Manager of Low Carbon City Lab for Climate-KIC, Paola Rusconi, representing Deutsche Bank, the Investment Manager for the European Energy Efficiency Fund, and Magnus Morelius, Head of Treasury for the City of Gothenburg. We are very honored to have you here today and are looking forward to listening to your insights and recommendations. Now, to the subject at hand. District energy development projects often demand high capital expenditures in infrastructure. In order to successfully carry out these projects, cities need to have the right funding schemes, which are crucial to maintaining a reasonable overall cost. Reasonable funding schemes, in turn, require finding investors who are willing to make the long-term investments and establishing transparent working relations with them. Each project is different, so unfortunately, there are no ready-set solutions, but today's experts will explain that there are European programs and investment funds specialized in finding solutions to these types of challenges. So let's hear what Victor, Paola, and Magnus have to share from their experience in setting up successful funding solutions for district energy development. Starting with Victor Gansel. Victor is managing the Low Carbon City Lab, also known as LOCAL, a Climate-KIC flagship program aiming at unlocking climate finance for cities. LOCAL provides local authorities with training, project preparation, investment, and impact assessment tools and services. He has over 5 years' experience in developing innovative low-carbon solutions all over the world. Prior to working for Climate-KIC, Victor worked in innovative services development in the aerospace industry and community forestry in Africa. He holds a master's in science and finance from Université de Paris-Dauphine. So Victor, in your experience, what are some barriers to investment that cities are facing? Can LOCAL help overcome those barriers? And if so, how?
Thank you very much, Emilia, for this introduction. I'll start shortly with a few words about the Climate-KIC. I don't know to what extent the audience knows us, but the Climate-KIC is EU's largest climate innovation public and private community. So our role is to foster collaboration between the public and private sector in Europe to support climate innovation. So we are supported by the European Institute of Technology, which is a body of the European Union. We are present in more than 6 EU countries and collaborate with many others. We've built over the last 7 years one of the world's largest public and private community addressing climate change through innovation. Our partnership comprises more than 250 organizations. Our ecosystem is quite diverse to reflect the complexity of the climate change challenge. So approximately 50% of our partners come from the private sector. We're working with startups, SMEs, and large corporates, while the other half comprise world-class research centers and academics, public authorities, and not-for-profits. Interestingly, municipalities can be part of our partnership. As an example, Valencia, Copenhagen, Bologna, Helsinki are cities collaborating with us. We are active in 4 themes: urban transitions, sustainable production systems, sustainable land use, and decision metrics and finance. Through regular calls for proposals, we drive our community of innovators to develop solutions around those 4 areas. I'm now going to present you the Low Carbon City Lab, which is our flagship program aiming at unlocking climate finance for cities. As you know, the amounts of funding needed towards a low-carbon economy are tremendous. The new climate economy estimates them at 93 trillion in the next 15 years. And most of this funding deals with urban infrastructure, so it really highlights the critical role that cities will play in the future in the global fight against climate change. This 15 years time frame I believe, give us a false sense of, having the time. Actually, new urban infrastructure to be built in the next 5 years is actually critical in meeting a 2-degree target or not. The problem is that cities currently face tremendous barriers to investment, so much that the further you zoom in, the harder it seems to invest in them. So cities across the globe face national barriers, for example, in their regulatory environment with their national governments, their dependence on intergovernmental transfer, down to very micro-scale barriers. As an example, their competencies to design and structure sustainable infrastructure projects. On top of that, following the 2008 economic crisis, cities are also in the eye of a storm. So nonetheless, the various monetary policies that have been implemented to address the crisis have led to a decrease of interest rates, making money cheap and theoretically abundant. This decrease in interest rates is creating, on the other hand, tensions on long-term investors' business models. Insurance and pension funds are expected to deliver certain returns to their clients, which becomes harder in a low interest rate environment. This is one of the reasons we're currently witnessing an increasing interest in sustainable infrastructure among those long-term investors. So the channel in the next years will be to leverage on those conditions, knowing that we are now in an environment where economic actors expect a growth in interest rates, which could, which could slow the investment in sustainable infrastructure within cities. The Low Carbon City Lab, so the program I have the pleasure to manage, has identified 3 main activities where it hopes to make a meaningful contribution to increase the amount in investment within cities. Influencing public and industry policy to align investment plans with environmental and social outcomes. Mobilizing a community of investors and cities to bring more funds in sustainable infrastructure. Finally, integrating environmental analysis in infrastructure projects. This approach guides our theory of change. We're currently aiming at 5 outcomes: helping cities to know their climate impact, standardizing project preparation and impact assessment practices, creating a visible pipeline of projects, and providing investors and cities with the right investment mechanisms. As an innovation platform, we are growing organically a portfolio of solutions developed by our partners to generate impact. The Low Carbon City Lab is a place where cities, investors, solution developers can come to develop funding mechanisms and impact assessment tools with us. We have built a community of practice over the last 3 years. Local now involves more than 30 partners coming both from the private and the public sectors. I'm going to present you a few of our innovations just to give you a taste of what does local provide to cities and investors, and also how does the Climate-KIC work. One of our projects that might be relevant to the audience is the Matchmaker project developed together with the CDP, the former Carbon Disclosure Projects. So investors claim that money out there, but projects are missing. On the other hand, cities claim that reaching out to investors is difficult. To bridge that gap, we're developing a city investor matchmaking service together with the CDP. The objective is to make visible a pipeline of city projects that are being prepared by cities and make it visible to investors. We will also guide investors, facilitate, curate their interactions with cities. So here we hope that Matchmaker is going to contribute to making cities attractive investment opportunities. We have all heard about green bonds, and Magnus will later talk about them. There's tremendous traction on this market. However, issuing debt remains a great challenge for cities in Europe. We've seen successes. We see flagship cities issuing green bonds, but this is the tip of the iceberg. There's a big, tremendous amount of cities that could benefit from green bonds to access investors. So following previous successes we had last year, we supported Mexico City in its issuance. We're now building a set of training modules for cities to get access to the green bond markets. So it's about strategic guidelines. What could be one city a strategy when it comes to green bonds? Is this issuing debt itself, or is this using proxies such as utilities to access this market? It's about helping cities to assess ex ante the impact of their bonds. It's training on the overall green bonds issuance process. We also have a dedicated program which is separate to the Low Carbon City Lab, but that I wanted to flag, which is called Smart Sustainable District. So this is another flagship program. We have 6 flagship programs within the Climate-KIC, including local. This one is called Smart Sustainable District. This is another initiative that aims at facilitating and planning the implementation of smart solutions, smart climate solutions within districts. So as you can see on the map, we're already collaborating with more than 8 sustainable districts in Europe. And if you're interested in knowing more, please contact me. So my short conclusion is that the challenges are tremendous. Luckily, we have a set of European programs, and local is just one of them. Climate-KIC is just one of them, one of the bigger initiatives. Come on in, we're open. I think that those European programs can help you to access finance. They can help you to measure your impact. As an open innovation platform, I'm also very keen on hearing back from the audience on what are your needs. Are there solutions that within our portfolio that interest in? Are you interested in developing solutions within local and the Climate-KIC as a whole? So thank you very much. I'll hand over the floor now.
Thank you very much, Victor. That was a great introduction. To the audience, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to use the chat function on the lower hand corner, as we mentioned at the beginning of this webinar. Actually, while people think, I have a couple questions for you. In your matchmaker program, how many proposals you receive per year, more or less, to be part of this program? And of those, how many do you take up? Do you take all of them? And what's your selection criteria?
Very good question. So we are now making the service live and operational, but last year we've worked with 20 cities and we're still keeping on that work, cities from Europe, but also outside of Europe. I would say the main vetting criteria is cities' competencies. Are they really able to structure this project? I think there's a huge capacity competence gap, and some cities are very far from attracting any private finance. So that's one key element. Also, this competence gap calls for better integrating capacity building activities with matchmaking. So that's one element. The second vetting process, I would say, is political buy-in. Large infrastructure projects really call for high-level local municipal buy-in and sometimes even national buy-in. So these are the 2 criteria. We're also integrating matchmaker into this overall Climate-KIC ecosystem of solutions. So mainstream the impact assessment practices, mainstream the project preparation practices, all this to make it easier for investors and cities to engage with us.
Thank you. That's very interesting. You say, okay, so facilities who don't have those competencies, who basically don't make the cut, do you help them? Do you give them tools so that they can improve and then hopefully make it? with these project information transfer, or if it's not you, who could help them improve their level so that they could eventually be part of such a platform?
Yes, very, very good question. So I could not present you the Low Carbon City Lab as a whole, but we have a full training and capacity building work stream. The Climate-KIC has been investing a lot in the last years in creating online training platform. We're working with learning designers. We're experts in blended learning, and the idea within the Low Carbon City Lab is to have this work stream of capacity building, online courses, training activities for cities that need it. The Green Bond for Cities project is an example on really in the ground type of training activities we are undertaking with cities. Last years, we've worked with municipalities from Morocco and Tunisia to get them to increase their competencies in structuring projects, in accessing climate finance. So there's a whole set of capacity building activities that I could not present there, but that are part of the Low Carbon City Lab.
Great. So I strongly recommend all our listeners to go to the website that's available right now on the screen, local.climate-kic.org, for more information. Thank you. Hopefully we can expand a little bit more on green bonds after Magnus's presentation. So look forward to expanding on that. But for now, we could move forward with Paola, who is a portfolio manager for the European Energy Efficiency Fund, the EEEF. She joined Deutsche Bank in 2016 with 6 years of industry experience. Prior to joining Deutsche Bank, Paola was head of smart cities and innovation at Medicredito, sorry about that, Italiano, Inesta San Paolo Group, where she previously served as project manager for energy efficiency and officer for renewables. She started her career as an associate consultant for renewable energy at DNBGL, which is a consultancy company focused on consultant and third-party certification in different types of energies. She has a Master's of Science in Environmental and Land Planning Engineering from Politecnico de Milano and a Master in Management and Economics from Bocconi University. Paola, can you please tell us a bit more about the European Energy Efficiency Fund and the support you can provide for infrastructural development that promote energy efficiency?
Yes, thank you, Emilia. Thank you particularly for the effort with Italian. I can see it's complicated, but still very much appreciated. Yes, I will start first introducing briefly the European Energy Efficiency Fund and then giving some tips on how we see financing of district energy initiatives. Well, the European Energy Efficiency Fund, or EEEF, is funded by the European Commission together with the EIB and Cassa Depositi e Prestiti, the national promotional institution of Italy.
I'm sorry to interrupt. You might want to take over as a presenter so we can see the slide
pardon.
you're looking at.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Okay, better now, I think. So here we go. As I was saying, we have these three main investors, the Commission, EIB and CDP, aiming to support initiatives in the field of energy efficiency in the broader sense, with a link to the public sector. So we are looking for project promoters and developers liaising with the public sector or directly within the public sector, and developing projects with the main result of reducing the consumption of primary energy or CO2 emission at least by 20% compared to the baseline. This means that basically we are focusing on renewable energy, energy efficiency, again it's said in the broader sense, and clean urban transport systems. The funding of EEEF is in a flexible range mainly, between 5 and 25 million. When it comes to energy efficiency, usually we are required to go to the lower threshold of this range. But when we are specifically talking about district energy systems, as you said at the beginning, Emilia, the requirement is sometimes to go to the upper threshold, because these kind of investments are really capital intensive. The kind of support that EEF can give is in the wide spectrum of the financial tools. So mainly, I would say, debt in the different ways you can decline it. So long-term debt, basically, up to 15 roughly years of maturity, but at the same time, as an alternative, EEF can also be the equity investor in the various initiatives we are looking into. There is a third facility the fund is able to provide, which is the only one not market-based, and this is the facility of technical assistance. Here you can see, in short, the main features of this technical assistance facility, which is a new one for the fund, built on the experience we had with the previous facility funded by the European Commission and managed by EEF on its behalf. The new facility is looking again for the project in the same boundaries I have described before, so renewable energy, energy efficiency, and clean urban transport, or a mix of them, including, of course, district energy systems and district energy production. In this case, we are not assigning money to the beneficiaries, but services, and this is a huge difference compared to other sort of technical assistance facilities we see going around, and also with the other we had previously managed. So we assign to the public entity, the municipality, or again a public entity, a team of consultants able to cover all the issues related to the development of a project. So from the energy audit to the development of the business case and financial model, financial feasibility studies, tender documentation, and so on. We have received already some applications, I would say several applications, and signed a first one with the City of Gijón in Spain, and we're about to sign a second one in Ferrara in Italy. The facility is open for application without any deadline until and subject to the availability of remaining funding. So you can go and use the links you see in this slide, go to the site of EEF and look for all the information and apply directly from that address. When it comes to decide how to finance or how to structure financing, cities are mainly, I would say, three chapters, or maybe an IT issue. Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, because the presentation disappeared from my screen. Now it's back. Okay. So a city needs to face three chapters of decision in the process of financing a district energy system, or more in general, energy efficiency initiatives. The first one is what kind of capacity to increase indebtedness the city has, and this is the chapter, or the financial room to maneuver. If there is no room for new debt in the balance sheet of the city, then they need to look for a party and a partner for financing the initiative, and this means going to the market of ESCOs or utility companies. Secondly, they need to see if they have sufficient technical skills to manage directly, or on the other hand indirectly, these kind of structured projects. And as a third point, the existing obligations they have. In many cases, we see existing contractual obligations between an in-house company and the municipality, and not in-house, but still a company already running a contract for the same kind of services. The city is looking for replacement. And based on this level of decisions, the city is able to address the financing structure for direct or indirect financing, so taking on the balance sheet, on their own balance sheet, the new project, or approving to send this to another company, collaborating with them for the next several years. When it comes to indirect financing, so we have a municipality liaising with the ESCO or a private company anyway, we have basically, in many cases, this same structure you are looking into now in this slide. We have three facilities in this kind of project, in this model. A facility for energy production, you see on the left side of the screen, CCHP plant or pure CHP plant, and on the right side, the network for district heating and cooling distribution, and the national electricity grid. The financing model I'm about to present is related to financing a new facility for additional production of energy, so the CCHP plant.
Paola, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I don't believe the slide changed for us. Maybe you want to take over as a presenter again, or click on the slide on the next slide. I'm not sure why we're still on the previous slide where you explained. Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. So we see in orange the three facilities: the CCHP plant, the district heating and cooling network, and the national electricity grid. In this model, we are talking about financing the production facility, so the C or CCHP plant, and usually this implies that we have a special purpose vehicle, a project SPV dedicated to this project, funded by an equity partner and a long-term debt provider, lender. The private company is usually, as said, a sort of energy service company or utility company, public or private. Whilst on the operations side, so the bottom of the slide, we have the players managing the construction and operations of the contract. There can be the same parties funding the SPV, so the ESCO or the utility, or third parties not already mentioned in the contractual structure of the SPV. And then it comes to the output exploitation. This is in charge to the municipality when we are feeding a district heating network, and the utility company managing the national electricity grid. In the bubbles you can see the main concerns or point to focus for the financier. For funding, we look for the expertise of the private party or the company managing the vehicle and the facility, and their mid to long-term outlook in the financial sense and the broader commercial sense. So we see them able to stay on the market in the right way for the next 10, 12, 13, 15 years, the duration of the concession and the contract for financing. On the operational side, again, here we have a matter of expertise, of course. We look into the kind of technology adopted, if this has a good track record and if it's proven enough to give us the comfort to proceed. If the technology and the facility is guaranteed on the quality delivered, how the operation and maintenance concept is defined and well structured, and in case we have supply matter. This is most relevant in case of biomasses. We look for long-term agreements to ensure that the plant will be able to run properly for the duration of the contract. There is also a kind of evaluation of the municipality and also of the utility company exploiting the national electricity grid, because we need them to be committed in the long run with the project we are financing. We look to see an adequate level of predictability of the revenues against the market risk we can see in several initiatives we are financing or looking into. And we also evaluate, sorry, again, an IT issue, disconnected and then reconnected, but I think you are still following, right?
Yes, we're still on the model key and key drivers for indirect finance.
Okay, last but not least, as I was saying, we would like to see a municipality with a good credit quality and ensuring the capability of paying steadily over the next years to the special purpose vehicle and the partners in our project. Let me just reconnect. I don't know why it's continuing disconnecting and reconnecting, but I see you are not aware of the problem at all, so I'm the only one seeing the issue. Okay, fine. A couple of case studies just to show with some names and figures in practice what we are talking about. We have this first one, case studies funded by EEF in France, in the city of Rennes, where we were equity providers together with Dalkia for the CHP plant linked to the district heating network of the city itself, the city of Rennes. In this case, the project is totaling, because it's still up and running, around 48 million euro of investments, with a fee and a portion funded by EEF as an equity provider of 7.3 million in junior funds and shareholder loan, with a duration of 10 years in this case. The project is most relevant in terms of energy production and at the same time savings in CO2 equivalent emissions, equaling 59% compared to the baseline. In this case, as said, we were investors in the proper sense, together with Dalkia in the SPV, covering 84.4% of shareholders' obligation for the SPV itself, and the rest, alongside with Dalkia, providing 15.6% of the equity contribution to the project. In terms of contracts, we had a shareholder loan, shareholder agreement between Dalkia and EEF, and Dalkia was at the same time also the O&M provider, EPC and O&M provider for the plant, and in charge to cover the biomass supply need of the plant. Whilst for the exploitation of the output, we had a concession. The SPV has a concession with the city of Rennes for feeding their district heating network for the next 10 years. And EDF was the utility company purchasing the electricity output from the plant and putting it in the national electricity grid. Another example where EEF was not an equity provider but a lender, so a debt provider to the project. This one is in Italy, in the city of Bologna. And in this case, the project SPV, named ISOM SPA, is funded by 3 companies, Manutencoop, Siram and Sinlog, together in a project consortium funding the SPV itself. And EEF, as you can see from the slide, is on the debt side as a lender to the project. The project consortium with different tasks and assignments was in charge also for the EPC and O&M part. And the SPV had only one concession agreement in this case because they were feeding the, let's say, district energy system of an hospital facility. So with only one counterparty exploiting both the electricity and the heat portion produced by the CCHP plant. So the concession agreement to feed the buildings, the several buildings of the hospital, was signed between the SPV ISOM and the hospital itself, Sant'Orsola Malpighi. But the funding coming from the hospital and the capability to purchase it, to cover all the obligations agreed with the project SPV are backed by the region Emilia-Romagna. So the project is at the local level, at the hospital level, but it's backed up by the region Emilia-Romagna in the center of Italy in this case. Again, a project much relevant in terms of savings, 31% compared to baseline, but also important and received premium because of the technical complexity they achieved with success and the possibility to replicate it in other similar contexts for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very interesting, very illustration of how you work and some clear cases of projects you funded, particularly for this last one in Bologna. When was it implemented? I believe it says right, when was it implemented? And since the implementation, has it been able to expand? So, and I guess this could go also. The question could go also for Rennes. You came in and invested in the beginning of a district energy system, but since that investment, has the energy system been able to satisfy new end users and expand the density and expand of the network?
The two cases are different, one from the other. In the case of Rennes, the network was already existing while the CCH plant was greenfield, and we participated to the construction phase from the very beginning. Whilst in the case of the hospital Sant'Orsola Malpighi, there is not, there is already a system for distribution of heating and cooling and electricity in the buildings of the hospital, but they have been completely renovated. And again, in this case as well, EEF participated from the first steps of the project development, including then both the CCHP plant and the system for distribution to the buildings of the hospital.
Great, thank you. And regarding the facility for technical assistance, would you recommend that cities start here before they apply for funding, and is there any cost of benefiting of being part of this facility, of benefiting from the services, or is it just one has to apply and if you get selected, then it's all win situation?
Well, we do not require that a city pass through the technical assistance to receive funding for the investment phase of the project from EEF. If they are in need for support in the development phase of project, they can apply and submit their project proposal to EEF to be evaluated and possibly eventually also funded for these activities. It needs to be clarified that the technical assistance is sort of grant-based, but subject to the achievement of certain obligations agreed on in the contract of technical assistance itself. Among them, for example, they need to exploit and run through all the tasks agreed in the time frame of 2 years for technical assistance, meeting this deadline of 2 years from the moment they start with the technical assistance services. Secondly, EEF asks to be involved in the investment phase of the project. This is an example of second condition we ask for when it comes to technical assistance, not to be repaid back from the beneficiary.
Okay. If there are no other questions from the experts or the participants, I do have one more question for you about how many projects apply, and of those, about what percentage do you select? Is it because you have a given quota, or just you don't, projects need to satisfy a minimum requirement, or a combination of both?
Yeah, we have received several inquiries related to the technical assistance over the last months. We have shortlisted 6 of them as possible candidates to the facility, and finally signed with one of them in the city of Gijón in Spain, and we are about to sign with another one in Ferrara. But discussion is ongoing with other parties which have not officially applied yet, because as you know, as I've said, the facility is open for application on a first come, first served basis from now to the moment when we will run out of money for funding this facility.
Great, thank you for that reiteration and clarification.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Great. So, last but not least, Magnus Borelius was head of the Treasury when City of Gothenburg became the first city in the world to issue a green bond in 2013. Since then, the city has issued 3 more bonds and is becoming a frequent user of the green bond market. The projects eligible for these green bonds promote the transition to a low-carbon and climate-resilient society. In fact, in recent years, much of his work has been focused on how the Treasury operations can help the economics of climate change. I'd like to also point out that Magnus is also a competitive athlete. He has passion for running and outdoor sports. So far, he has completed 24 marathons. Needless to say, he has a mindset to break through limits. Magnus, can you please tell us a bit more about your experience in issuing green bonds? What advantages do they present? What, if any, have been the challenges in putting these bonds in place?
Hey, thank you very much for inviting me here to speak about the city's work with green bonds. And just some short brief facts about the city of Gothenburg here. And the city has the largest company group in the municipality sector in Sweden. And we own our own amusement park. We have the largest port in Scandinavia. We own energy company. And we own real estate companies as well. So City of Gothenburg is a AAA rated municipality with a debt of approximately 4 billion euro outstanding today. And the Treasury manages all the financial services for the companies, and we have been active in the bond market since the 90s. But like you heard there, in September 2013, we became the first city in the world to issue green bonds, and I had the privilege to be a part of that team that started from scratch more or less and took it to the market. And that changed the way we use the Treasury, because for the first time, the Treasury and the sustainability colleagues started to working together. And we issued green bond number 5 last week, and now almost 50% of our outstanding debt is green. And the interest from the investor is huge, it's growing. And the bond last week was oversubscribed almost 3 times. So next slide, please. Mm-hmm. So what is the difference here between a green bond and an ordinary bond? And the specific use of funds raised to support the financial of specific projects distinguish green bonds from regular bonds. Thus, in addition to evaluating the standard financial characteristics like maturity, coupon, price, and credit quality, or whatever it might be, investors also issue the specific environmental purpose of the project that the bond intends to support. So when the City of Gothenburg issues green bond, we do it for the following categories in that way. It's sustainable transportation, it's waste management, it's water management, sustainable housing, smart grids, environmental energy efficiency, and renewable energy and biofuel. And all those categories are from the City of Gothenburg's environmental program. So by the time we issue bonds, the investor don't know exactly where the money is going, just that it will end up in some of the categories here. And then later in our annual report, we present exactly to what kind of projects the money is allocated for. Next slide, please.
Mm-hmm.
So the difference here, like you know, that we have to present where the money is going. We have an impact report, and this is from the front page from our impact report, and also an example of what it can look like. And we release an impact report every second year, and here transparency are very important for the investors. And here the investors can read about all the different projects that we have. It's specified, and the City of Gothenburg's green bond eligible projects promote the transition to a low carbon and climate resilient society. So in order to identify the green bond eligible projects, a rigorous review and approval process is in place to ensure that all our projects are in line with the city's framework for green bonds and targeting the mitigation and adaptation to the effects of the climate change and other important environmental aspects. So a working group within the city with expertise on climate change, the environmental, financial markets and financial instruments are also involved in this selection process, ensuring both green and secure investments in that way. And some of the examples that we have invested in is we have the Go By Gas, which is biofuel. We have electric cars. We have sustainable housing also, and we have Ultrafilter, which is the Department for Sustainable Waste and Water Management. We have desertification. We have tree planting. We have what we call the pedestrian city and the bicycle city. And one of the best things with having these different kind of categories is that when we issue a bond, we can pool projects, because it would be impossible to issue a bond for, say, tree planting. That would be not enough money to issue a bond. But here we can pool all the projects and issue one big green bond in that way, and then later distribute the money as that way. Next slide, please.
Yes.
So here you can just briefly see the selection process that we use. And one of our biggest challenge right now is to implement this in the whole group, since it started out like a project from the Treasury Department together with sustainable colleagues, and now to implement it in all the companies so that they really work and try to think green bonds when they plan the investment. So we have the project evaluation and selection. So it starts with the City of Gothenburg's environmental program. And then we have the management of proceeds. We actually have the green bond account in the cash management system in that way. We show at the annual investor report the preliminary allocation to each project for the coming year as well, sort of give the investors a heads up what is coming here. And then we have impact measuring and reporting. And then we try to estimate significant reductions in the greenhouse gas emissions and so on. And here you also see that it's important for us at the Treasury to work together with the sustainability colleagues, because it's impossible for the Treasury to answer all those questions that suddenly are part of our work here on an everyday basis. It's not the point here that the Treasury should be experts in environmental questions. We should be experts in financial, but start to work with your environmental colleagues in that way. That much of the work that needs to be done here is already done by those working with these questions. And then we have the eligible criteria and use of proceeds as well, with framework targeting sectors and projects with positive effects on the climate, environment, and so on. And we also have our framework reviewed by a second party, in this way it's Cicero. And I think that's important for the credibility, just to use a second opinion or second party in as many steps as possible to really verify that you're doing what you said you're supposed to do to the market here. Next slide, please.
Yes.
The investor relation, and that has changed a lot since we started with this. And you can find all our green information about our green bonds at finance.gothenburg.se. And it's one of the most visited sites at the moment. I think we have 20,000 unique visitors here to look into it. And here you can find everything from our green bond framework, the project, the second opinion, investor reporting, and so on. And this also changed the way we interact with our investors in that way, because it starts to increase the credibility and focus on the sustainability work here when the money starts to be a part of it. And we have reached out to new investors that we haven't seen in our books before, which is positive from a financial point of view. And we also have received phone calls from people living in Gothenburg, the citizens, who ask, "How can we be a part of this? We want to invest in the green bonds." Unfortunately, we can't sell the bonds to the retail market in that way, just institutional investors. But now you can buy in asset management funds, you can buy the green bonds there as well. So it's interesting to see how even people living in the city start to pay attention to this. We also had an increased and improved contact with the investors, because here everyone wants it to work. And that means that we have investors visiting the city here and want to hear about the work, the environmental work that we do. We are visiting the sites that the money is invested in, and that never happened before actually. It was just a question of presenting the annual report and what kind of money we have to raise from. So the investors start to pay a lot more attention to the city in that way, and we think that's very positive. We get more and more closer to our investors. Next slide, please. And that is financing a sustainable future, and that is just a very good example of what we are talking about here, because this is an example of two tombstones. And that is sort of in the financial world or in the financial press, and you put in the financial press to tell you that we have issued a bond and it's of this size and this is for the investors. And that never happened in the municipalities, that investors want to tell you that we have invested in City of Gothenburg's bond. But when you add the green aspect to the bond, the investors start to be much more positive in that way, to show that we are a part of this. And that's also one very good thing for the city, is that the investors go public and say, we have invested in the City of Gothenburg. But at the same time, they're also putting their logo next to the City of Gothenburg, side by side. And that means that we have to work even harder to make sure that what we have said, that we really deliver that, because they're also taking a risk if we not deliver that kind of environmental effect that we say we will do. So, and that don't happen with the green bonds here, that you see the public investors, and they put their reputation sort of at stake here as well. And next slide, please.
Yeah.
So, what we also see at the credit rating agencies are started paying attention here, and this is the first, just a snapshot of our green bond assessment here from Moody's. And the green bond assessment from Moody's of GVS reflects the adoption by the City of Gothenburg of a formal and rigorous process to identify, consider, evaluate, and select eligible projects for the different funding through the issuance of green bonds. And it involves a process by which projects are screened to ensure that they are aligned with the city's green bond framework and the city's environmental program and climate strategy initiatives before being reviewed by the city executive board that ultimately approves eligible projects for funding. And I think this is also important for us to have this green bond assessment here, that also a second opinion on what we do that we can bring to the market when we issue the bonds. So we also start to see signs of price difference between an ordinary bond and a green bond, for the positive side for the green bond. And we think that is very interesting to follow, to see how the interest rate on green bonds develops from here, and if there will continue to be a positive effect of it. Next slide, please. Mm-hmm. This is from London Stock Exchange Green Bond segment, and that is also to increase our transparency and credibility once again. And this is from the Twitter flow from the London Stock Exchange when we listed our bonds on the London Stock Exchange. And that's also to show the investors that we really want to be good at it. We want to be transparent. We want to tell the market exactly what we do, because to admit green bonds to London Stock Exchange dedicated green bond segment, issuers are required to provide the exchange with a relevant second opinion and documents that certifies the nature of the bond. So the choice of the certification provider is up to the issuer and its advisor. But London Stock Exchange does, however, set minimum criteria that the third-party green bond certifier should meet in order for the instrument to be included in the relevant green bond segment. And so now we are listed at the LSE, and we think that helps us to improve the focus and credibility, also a second opinion on our green bond works. And we also see that the market is growing. Interest from the investors is increasing. When we issued the first green bond in 2013, the market were around $13 billion US dollars. And last year, the market ended up at 2016 around $80 billion. And so far for 2017 here, we are up for $45 billion US dollars. So the interest is huge. The market is growing. And we think that is also very positive to see more and more issuers coming to the market. So the final slide, please.
Mm-hmm.
We were very honored when we last year were awarded with the UN Climate Solutions Award and on the COP22 conference. And Momentum for Change is an initiative spearheaded by the United Climate Change Secretariat to shine a light on the enormous groundswell of activities underway across the globe that are moving the world towards a highly resilient, low-carbon future. And Momentum for Change recognizes innovative and transformative solutions here that address both the climate change and wider economic, social, environmental challenges. So I think that also put the spotlight here on the importance of green bond and the financial markets, or green finance in that way. That there are people who want to invest in these kinds of projects on a global basis, and the interest is continuously growing. What we see for the future here, you see it's important that green bond does not make you green. That is very important to remember, because you have to have a solid environmental work to start with, and then when you need the money, you start to raise it by green bond or green finance in that way. And we also see a rapidly increased interest here. When we issued the first bond, we saw an interest from the financial market. When we issued the second bond, we saw from the NGOs and environmental organizations. But now when we issue the number 3, 4, and 5 here, we see more and more interest in building sustainable cities that way. So it's an instrument that can help us to raise money. And we also see increased demand on impact reporting. What is more or less green, more and more standard. When we started, there were no standards at all. You have to take it step by step and just do the best you can to see if the investors are satisfied with that. So now you see it's more and more documents that you can use when you want to issue a green bond for the first time. And I think the city's aim here is to return to the market on a regular basis and transform more and more our debt and common investments to the green market. And we think it's possible to have an outstanding of 100% green in that way. We are not there yet. It's still some years left, but we are working as hard as we can to reach that goal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Magnus. Very, very interesting, this history of how. But how did the idea come up for the city to issue a green bond?
The idea to issue it was that we had a meeting with the World Bank that more or less have invented this concept. But that was as an asset manager, because we have around 1 billion in asset management for foundations, old money donated to the city from very wealthy families. And that is not the city's money, it's just money that we have under management. Then this money have a will with them that sort of benefits some different kind of areas, whatever it might be, like education or whatever. But when we saw this, we saw that we could invest in green bonds, but that was mostly in very small projects in the part of the world that is have quite tough times. But when we were actually back on a train trip back from Stockholm, we say, hey, can't we change it? Can't we as a city, who has come a long way with our environmental work, start to issue a green bond? So we just called the World Bank and the bank in charge at that time, SEB, and presented our ideas, and they thought it was a good idea, and they helped us. So it was, shall we say, not a strategic decision. It was more or less sort of a gut feeling that this is the right thing to do. So from there, it started to grow.
That's great. I'd like now to open the floor to all the experts. But continuing on the question of green bonds here. You seem to have a very set structure in selection and in your processes. I was wondering, do you know, and maybe Victor, you can also provide an answer for this, are other cities that are issuing green bonds have similar or exact same processes, or can each city sort of has to define their own selection and emission processes?
I think when it comes to the selection process and so on, it's quite similar. There are no standards yet, and I think a lot of those who issue the green bonds are talking with each other. We are talking with the same intermediaries, say the banks in that way, or other NGOs working with the green bonds. So you start to develop it together in that way. So of course, every issuer have a small variety or from the selection process, but I think that's quite very much the same in that way.
All right.
But I think you will see in the coming years, you will see a much more standardized process in that way. I think it's also important to remember that it's quite a young market in that way, and it started from zero with no standards, nothing you actually could to look at. See, you have to do it by trial and error in that way.
Yeah, it sounds so it is very different when a city emits a green bond than when a private company or a bank emits a green bond. Or is it more or less the same principle?
I think the principles are the same in that way. I think that's important that you don't develop one standard for municipalities, cities, and one standard for the private sector. So I think that's important that they're more or less the same. I think the difference is just a city can be much more open in that way on information in what they do. Since in our case, all information is public in that way.
Yeah.
So you can share much more information in that way when you develop, say, the selection process. We can be 100% open in that way, and let a lot of people or experts look into it, have their opinions and whatever, and move quite fast in that way.
Sorry. Victor, continuing on green bonds, can any city, and maybe Magnus as well, can any city emit a green bond, or does the city itself need to have certain requirements, such as you mentioned, excellent credit ratings, excellent good funds to use, or can almost any city emit any type of bond?
So thanks a lot for this question. It's a complex question. I think the first step is to assess whether or not cities are authorized by their central government to issue debt. So if you take the case of Morocco, for example, cities are not allowed, subnational authorities are not allowed by their central government to have access to those market. Yes, creditworthiness is a very important, is a crucial step, whether or not, cities are seen as a credit-worthy entity by the market is crucial. And there's a third criteria, which with regards to what types of project, green bonds is one aspect of, let's say, one funding sources for municipalities to implement low carbon and resilient action, but it has also specific criteria when it comes to the project size. This is no municipality or utility is going to issue bonds for very small amounts, so you have to think of those minimum caps. 50 million, 100 million euros are, I would say, rule of thumb on the minimal size for using green bonds. Yes, Magnus has highlighted this overall standard panorama of standards. There are various understanding of what a green bond is. As an example, critical coal is considered as eligible for green bonds in China, in other standards or other countries. This is not the case, but we should not remember that a green bond is a bond, so it's a financial instrument that is done and dusted. We've been using bonds for centuries. We're just in parallel bringing this green layer on top of it. So there's nothing, I would say, nothing new under the sun when it comes to green bonds. This is just, adding environmental data to an existing financial mechanism.
Thank you. Paola, Magnus, do you have anything to add to this?
I think it's important to just what we talked about here, to say that just adding the green thing to the bonds is not a new financial instrument. And for us, it was very easy to implement it, since we have been issuing bonds since the mid-90s in that way. We were well known in the market. But I think it's also important to talk about green finance in that way. That I think there's a lot of interest for green investments, so it doesn't necessarily have to be bonds in that way. You talk a lot about green bonds, but that's just the instrument. I think green finance is more relevant in that way, because the investors have a lot of money and a lot of interest to invest in these kinds of projects.
Okay. Could you please remind us examples of green finance that are not necessarily green bonds?
Yeah, I think that when you raise funds, whatever it might be, whether it's a bank loan or you talk directly to investors, or you use the bond market or whatever. I mean, how you fund yourself. I think that differs a lot depending on where you are in the world. If you have the possibility to issue bond or not issue bond, and how you get your money in that way.
So, for example,
sorry.
No, go for it. Sorry.
No, I think just identify how do we raise our funds? Where does the money come from? And can we add this green layer to it, whatever kind of instruments or sources we have?
Just maybe a comment. Yeah.
Sorry. Yes, Victor.
Yes, and I think it's on top of what Magnus just said. So yes, we have out there a growing number of, I would say, earmarked green climate finance flows, MDBs, multilateral development banks. We've got European initiative, and Magnus stated that this is the source, but I think we should also not forget this is also how you're using existing finance. How can you green existing finance? And then on this overall strategy, implementing a sustainable procurement policy within a city, in my opinion, should be accounted as also green finance. We should not forget that, municipal budget, municipal finance that exists already can also be seen as clean finance, can be used as a vehicle to implement low carbon and resilient action in cities. So the Green Climate Fund, all those big things are, sometimes the tree that is hiding the forest behind it, and there are many existing mechanisms, many existing funding mechanisms that can be used quite successfully in I would say with a climate objective.
Yes, great. And that sense, then, what one could say, for example, Paola, would you consider the European Energy Efficiency Fund green financing? And if so, in what way?
Well, actually, all we do is just green financing, in fact. So, yes, we definitely consider it. It's mainly our mission.
Right. It's great to see all these different developments, and I would almost dare to say that in that case, any investment in district energy could be considered green finance if it helps reduce carbon emissions. But what would you, right now, one of the big discussions in the air is also what happens within district energy. We use a lot of residual heat. What if it's residual heat that comes from fossil fuels, say refineries or such things? Would that be considered green as well, or where can one draw the limits? If there's a a mixing between, yes, it helps energy efficiency, and yes, it helps reduce carbon emissions, but it's still based on fossil fuels and on polluting agents.
Yeah, actually, we have some restrictions in this sense, exactly for the reasons you were describing, according to our investment guidelines. So we can, we are allowed in principle to look into projects recovering heat or residual and waste from traditional energy production plants, but with certain limitations. For example, for coal, we are very much limited, I would say. So in principle, yes, they are saving primary energy and saving as well CO2 equivalent emissions, but they are not green in the proper sense.
Thank you. Victor or Magnus, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I have nothing to add.
Not on my side as well.
All right, great. Then with that, I would like to conclude. So thank you to the presenters, Victor, Paola, and Magnus, for taking your time and sharing your experience and knowledge with us, and for participating in this discussion. And thank you for all the participants who